Welcome to the Using AJAX with jQuery screencast. This episode builds off some basic jQuery knowledge that we're going to assume you already know. If you're new to jQuery, we recommend that you first watch our Introduction to jQuery screencast, which you can download now at screencasts.org. jQuery has an arsenal of tools for you to include dynamic data in your web application. There are many different techniques which may suit one situation over another. In this screencast, we'll show you several ways that jQuery can load information off the web, which you can start using to enhance your projects right away. AJAX is a term that describes loading data dynamically without loading a new page. The browser sends a request in the background, and upon success or error, a callback is triggered, and then the data can be displayed or used. While AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML, the term AJAX now tends to cover all dynamically loaded content, whether it's XML, HTML, JSON, or even JavaScript. Historically, browsers implemented AJAX calls using different methods. Programmers would need to set up if statements to apply different code for different browsers. jQuery abstracts these differences away so the programmer doesn't have to be concerned with browser compatibility. When planning your web application's functionality, it's important to know that you can't load data from external domains directly via AJAX. If for some reason you do need to load data from another domain, you'll need to create a server-side proxy script to trick the browser into thinking that the data is from the local domain. The only exception to this is JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. You can load JSON from an external domain by specifying a callback to pass the JSON data into. This is called JSONP, or JSON with padding. There are many ways of including dynamic data in jQuery which will suit various situations. In our example, we have an image gallery. We have several pages with images on them, and in our later examples, they'll have a set of comments. The code for this example is linked in the show notes. As you can see, we have an image gallery with 5 images. When you click each of the links in the menu, a new page loads. You may notice on some social networks and image galleries that the page doesn't reload when you click on a next link. This leaves the page template behind and simply swaps out the image and any additional content. The simplest way to do this is by using the load method. What we want to do is swap out the image and the caption without loading an entirely new page. First, in the Gallery 1 folder, open up picture1.html in your editor. As you can see, within the container div we have 2 paragraph tags, one with an image and another with a caption. At the bottom of the file, we have jQuery already included, ready for us to code. Let's create a script tag for us to place our code. We need to attach a click listener to our menu links. In our anonymous function, we need to load the path of the link. The load method works by calling it on the jQuery representation of a given element. Once it's called, it loads the HTML fragment from the path passed into it as the first argument. In this example, the div will have the contents of the fragment.html file loaded within it. If the fragment contains more information than what's needed, you'll need to specify the CSS selector for the content you wish to load into your element. In this example, the div will only have elements with the class dynamic data loaded into it. In our example, we want to load the path of the link we've just clicked, this.href, into our container div. As you can see, this doesn't load as we'd like it, because the fragment we're loading isn't a fragment, but a full HTML page. so we need to select the content we want to inject. This can be done by adding the CSS selector container p. Now let's refresh picture1.html, and when we click on all the links, the image and caption get replaced on the same page without reloading. The load method is great for swapping out content in one container element. But if you notice in our example, the content changes, but the title of the page doesn't. If we want the title to be replaced, we need to go about it another way. jQuery offers a powerful AJAX method that can be used in any situation to load dynamic data into your web page. The AJAX method takes a set of key value pairs of attributes. The two keys you'll set values for are probably going to be URL and success. Once the data is loaded, we can then manipulate and transverse the data with jQuery in the same way as the current page in the current window. All you do is pass the data from the success callback into the jQuery selector method as a second argument. To take our example further, we're going to load an XML file via AJAX in the background when the page loads. We're going to store the data in memory so we don't have to keep doing requests every time a link is clicked. The XML file will contain only the necessary information needed for the image gallery, so we're saving on bandwidth too. First, let's open up pictures.xml. As you can see, we have the root element pictures and contain within it the 5 pictures with their respective captions and sources. While this file is static XML, this could be dynamically created on the server side using Ruby, PHP, or ASP. Let's remove our code from before and start fresh. It's a good idea to store elements you'll be using over and over again in variables. This saves jQuery from transversing the DOM every time we want to use it. Another good idea is to put a $sign before jQuery selected elements, so you always know what you're working with. Next, let's use the AJAX method to load the XML file. We'll set the URL key to pictures.xml and set the success key to the anonymous callback function. Once the data loads, we want to store the jQuery representation of the picture tags. jQuery allows you to transverse other HTML and XML documents by passing a second argument which tells jQuery what context it's selecting in. So with our XML document, data is being passed into our callback. To load the pictures, we need to first pass in picture as the element and pass in data as the second argument for the context. We then need to add a click listener to each link. Notice how the links within the menu div and the picture elements in the XML are in the same order. Once the link is clicked, we need to inspect what index the link is within the menu and select the appropriate picture from our pictures variable using that index. Now we have the appropriate picture selected. We can now use that to populate the image caption and page title. When we refresh the page, you'll now see that all 3 of the desired elements, the image, the caption, and the page title, are all updating dynamically. Working with XML or HTML can often feel verbose when trying to get at the data you really want. It can also be confusing switching between the different documents that you're transversing. Many people are starting to use JSON as their data type of choice. A JSON representation of your data is smaller than its XML equivalent, which reduces the bandwidth used between server and client. And since JSON is JavaScript, there's no need for conversion before using the data. Using XML with JavaScript requires a reformatting of the data into something JavaScript can understand and access, so using JSON results in a less verbose way of accessing data. Another great benefit of using JSON is that since it's native JavaScript, it's going to have better performance on the client side. So let's update our gallery to use JSON. If we open the pictures.json file, we see the same 5-picture array as we do in our XML. Now, let's modify our AJAX code to support the new, smaller JSON format. Let's change pictures.xml to pictures.json. Because the data returned is now a JSON object, we don't need jQuery to inspect the data. So it's simply pictures equals data. Let's also drop the $sign since this is now a purely JSON object. Now we can modify the functionality when we click a link. We get the linked pictures JSON representation by accessing the object at the position index in the array of pictures. We can then access its attributes via dot notation. So getting to the picture caption is as simple as picture.caption, and the source is simply picture.source. The code is now cleaner and easier to read. Let's see if it works in our browser. We hit refresh and click on the links, and yes, it still works. Great. Another way we can simplify our code is by using the getConvenience method. Get refers to the HTTP get method, so if you are loading from a path that responds to the get method, this is ideal. You don't need to specify the key value pairs. All you need to do is pass in the URL as your first argument and then the success callback as the second. So, using the get method, our code now looks like this. Other arguments can be passed into this method. For further information, see the jQuery API documentation. When we check the code in our browser, we can see we're getting the desired functionality. jQuery also offers a range of convenience methods that abstract the AJAX method away in the same way as the get method. They all take the same arguments, but they're for different types of requests. The post method, as you'd expect, is for post requests. This may be handy when you're submitting a form and the server will only respond to a post request. The getJSON method can be used for loading JSON via a GET request on your local domain. Or, if you provide a callback parameter in the URL, it will automatically know it's a JSON-P request for local and external data sources. The getScript method is used if you want to include a new JavaScript file in your page that you want to be executed. Once it's loaded, it will execute. For more alternative usages of these methods, please visit the jQuery documentation website. So let's move on to our second example. If you open up picture1.html from the Gallery 2 folder in your browser, you'll see a new section where there's a comments form and a list of comments. When you open it up in your editor, you'll notice a paragraph with the ID error and another paragraph with the ID loading. These are hidden in the CSS. It's always a good idea to give users clear feedback on the progress of what's happening in your application. For example, it's a good idea to show a loading message or image for things that are processing in the background, or show an error message if there's a problem. So in our example, let's show the error paragraph whenever there's a problem retrieving data via AJAX. This is done by using the AJAX setup method. The AJAX setup method takes the same key value pairs that the AJAX method would take. Let's pre-select the error paragraph and cache it in the variable error. Now, let's compose the AJAX setup method and give the error key an anonymous function to display the error paragraph whenever there's a problem. Let's test this out by changing the path in the get method to pictures.json1, which is an invalid file name. Now let's refresh our browser. Great, we're seeing our error message just as we expected. Now let's remove the 1 and refresh. Now that the file name is correct, the error message is not shown. Let's move on to the form. When we click Submit, we want to do 5 things. First, we want to hide the form. Second, we want to submit the form via AJAX. Third, we want to show the loading paragraph. Fourth, we want to append the new comment to the end of the comments list. Fifth, we want to hide the loading paragraph. As we've done before, let's cache these elements that we're going to use. Let's assign the form to $form, the loading paragraph to $loading, and the comments container to $comments. We want to bind an anonymous function to the form submit handler. When we submit the form, we want to hide it by calling the hide method on the form object. After that, we need to set up the AJAX method with the key value pairs. The type is post, URL is the form's action attribute, and the data is the serialized contents of the form. We can get the serialized contents by using jQuery's serialize method on the form object. Before we send the request, let's show the loading paragraph. We do this by specifying an anonymous function for the before send key. Then, when the data is successfully returned, we'll append that to our comments container. Note that the URL is a static HTML file. If you were doing this on a production system, you'd have the server return an HTML fragment with your newly persisted comment. When we refresh the page now and fill in the form, we see that the loading paragraph gets shown and the data gets appended to the comments container. However, we haven't hidden the loading paragraph on completion. We do this by simply creating an anonymous function for the complete key. This function gets executed after the success and error callbacks. This is exactly when we want to hide our loading paragraph. When we refresh the page and submit the comment again, we see the loading paragraph appearing and disappearing successfully. It does happen very quickly since our requests are on our local machine. However, in a production environment, this will show longer depending on the speed of the connection and the processing on the server. But showing a loading message like this really keeps the user informed, which is always important. In this Using AJAX with jQuery screencast, we've covered many topics. We've shown how to load fragments of HTML into container elements using the load method. We've shown how to transverse XML and use JSON to load data dynamically into multiple parts of a page. We've shown how JSON is the preferable data format because of its lightweight nature over the wire, which is great for mobile connections, its readability in the code, and its native JavaScript nature, which gives it a performance edge over HTML and XML. And we've shown how to set global and local callbacks in order to give users useful feedback and visual hints. We hope you've learned several valuable ways to use AJAX in your projects. Of course, strategies will vary from project to project, depending on constraints or requirements. Thank you for your time, and we hope you'll have fun putting your new skills to use. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, please email feedback@screencasts.org. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our RSS feed and newsletter to be notified about jQuery and other web development screencasts as they become available. See you next time.